13 months.
I was in Korea about 24 months. The reason why it took so long, I was there so long, is because normally it's a short tour. They call it a hardship tour because the family can't be stationed with you, and you had a shorter time that you had to stay over there. Most of the people that went to Vietnam were hardship tours, and they only did 13 months. However, I was lucky enough to go to Korea. And once I got over there, I extended another 6 months because knowing the way the Army thinks, I believe that if I had came back early, I might had enough time for another tour of duty, and they may have sent me to Vietnam.
Korea.
I was in Korea for a total of 16 months.
I was in Korea for what's called a hardship tour. It's 1 year, 12 months. You're there without your family.
I was actually in Korea for 16 months. Most of that time was, I was with an Army infantry company. I was a rifleman in a rifle squad or a regular combat unit most of the time. We were stationed, 12 of those 16 months, we were stationed just a couple miles below the DMZ, where that situation was still kind of tentative and unsettled at the time, even though the war had been over for a couple of years. There was always alerts and false alarms, so if anything did happen again, we would have been right there, the first ones that got engaged. In the middle of my tour, I spent 4 months down in Busan, down in the southern tip of Korea, where the ships came in. It was a port. Every 4 months, they sent one of our battalions down there to guard the waterfront, guard the shipping and the installations around there. So once that was done, we returned back up near the DMZ. But not that we're guarding against enemy action, but one of the big problems at that time was a pretty poor country, and there's a lot of pilferage and things going on. So that was our main concern, just protecting our interests and our supplies.
How long were you in Korea?
I was in Korea 13 months, 8 months combat.
I was in Korea from the beginning to the end.
11 months. 11 months. That was in 1951.
Were you in Korea?
10 months. My year was up. Like I said, it was a short time. Time I get there, time to come back. 10 months and they let me out.
Supply.
I was an enlisted man, and if they had a hold up, be dog, I dug it, or whatever. I was in artillery all the time. Had a MOS or a radar operator, but we never saw any radar sets, so it's... And, I worked in a service battery, and we serviced the firing outfits, bring them up ammunition, water, and all our supplies, basically. I drove a truck, I worked on the switchboard, dug a lot of holes, you know, that type of thing. We hauled all the shells up to the firing batteries. The service batteries generally fly 10 miles behind the firing batteries. In fact, one of our batteries, when the Chinese came down that time, got a presidential citation for being overrun by the Chinese, and did a wonderful job. Anyway, the shells were 105, came in a box, and we used to load them out back and just stack them up. And frankly, I forget about the 8-inch or the 155 shells. It was bigger, it was a bigger shell. I don't think they were in a box, though. I kind of forget. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
I can remember sometimes we get a call to, there was an 8-inch gun up on the line, and we'd have to go out and get artillery, and I can remember those shells weighed 212 pounds apiece. And I can remember the Koreans, they'd bring them up in a railroad car, and the two guys would drop it on a guy's shoulder, and he would go throw it in the back of the truck. And
wow.
we would go home. And they just roll back here. There's no it was an interesting time.
In the post office. It was writing money orders. That was my job, and the job called to be a corporal, and that's what they made me a corporal. Payday, when they got payday, they had nowhere to spend their money, so they sent all their money home. So for the first 3 days, I wrote from morning to night money orders. But one day, I was $94 short, and I could not figure the money had to be turned in by a certain time. Yeah, well, every night You had to zero out and give them your numbers. Couldn't find out where this $94 went to. So I pocketed it. And I figured next month somebody's going to come and say, hey, look, they didn't get the money order. And I would have gave them the $94. And I did this seriously. Got discharged, nobody asked for the money. It was all forgotten about. I got discharged. I'm working now, making $45 a week. I'm married. I got a child on the way. The FBI knocks on my door. They found the discrepancy of that $94, and I had to pay it back.
I was in charge of all the phones, switchboards, and I also did some other things, other jobs. I was a forward observer for some time, but most of the times I took care of the switchboards and all the phones that were connected to the artillery pieces and to the other headquarters and places like that who talk back and forth.
As I say, for the most part, I was a rifleman in the infantry squad.
On arrival in Korea, I was a radio systems officer. I was assigned to the 501st Signal Company, which is at Camp Humphreys. That's about 40 miles or 50 miles south of Seoul. At that point in time when I was there, it was just a little village, or a couple little villages surrounding it, rice fields all over, agricultural mostly. And my job there was to be a radio systems platoon leader, and also the other main duty I had was property book officer, where I was in charge of all the property that the company had and had to make sure that the property was located where it was supposed to be and was subsigned to the lowest level that I could subsign it to.
In a fighting unit, an Army infantry company. I did that for 12 months. The last 4 months, I became a gunner on a bazooka, which is a 3.5-inch rocket launcher, primarily an anti-tank weapon. In that position, I did not have to carry that rifle anymore. I was assigned a .45 caliber pistol that I wore on my hip, so that was kind of neat. But for the most part, that's what I did. I was in an infantry company.
What was your job there?
Demolitions. Blew up everything I could find. Trains, bridges, aircraft.
I went to when I joined the service, I asked for medical field service, and after the first 2 days of basic training, they selected the duty assignments for us, and it's interesting because they sent me to dental lab school, and I had no interest in dental in a dental lab or anything like that, but somehow or another they knew just from the test I took that that was something that I would be qualified for. And sure enough, when I went to dental lab school in Fort Sam, Houston, I loved it. And for those 3 years that I was in the service, I was a dental lab technician.
What were the Korean people like?
Most of them, well, that's the other thing now. In our time, each rifle squad of 9 men had one South Korean soldier attached to it. So it was 8 Americans and 1 South Korean. And they lived right with us the first winter I was there. We still lived in 8-man squad tents, 9-man squad tents. So we had one in with us all the time. And they knew more English than we did Korean, but between us, we assimilated a little of each other's language, and before long everybody could converse well and make their needs known. And I thought they were affable men and good soldiers. I brought a picture along with me that they're scanning into this interview, I think, of me with 3 South Korean soldiers taken on Christmas Day 1956 in Busan. 3 of my close friends down there. And yeah, I have never corresponded with any of them since, but there were some good people there.
So other than them, did you make any other lifetime friends in the service?
I'll tell you, there's several I wouldn't mind seeing again sometime. I have never seen any of them since I was discharged. There's always a few you'd wish you'd never see again, but there's also plenty that we were good friends, and I wouldn't mind seeing again sometime. I doubt that I do, but I would enjoy seeing them.
How did you communicate with home?
That was a fairly lengthy process. It was all handwritten letters at that time, and I'm sure it took a couple weeks to get back home, and then by the time you got a reply, it might be a couple weeks later. So it wasn't up to the minute news, but we could correspond that way. I took a lot of pictures, sent a lot of pictures home, and I did get to Japan on leave twice for a week each time. And one of those times I was in Japan, I called home. You couldn't do it from Korea, but I called home from Japan, reversed the charges, of course. We never had a lot of money. And I have no idea what time it was, probably the middle of the night there. I know it's a different day, you're on the other side of the international date line. But I did talk to my folks briefly at that time. At the time, as I recall, I think it cost about $3 a minute. It was not inexpensive. I mean, yeah, fairly costly, but it was the one time I did speak directly to the folks.
Did you see any combat?
No, I did not. It was 2 years after the war when I got there, and basically we were there to maintain combat readiness in case anything did come up again. Fortunately, nothing did, and we still have troops there to this day for the same reason, because it's kind of a rogue nation up there in North Korea. You never know what's going to happen next. I did not see any combat, no.
Where did you go for R&R?
Oh, we went to Japan. I went to Tokyo both times. They had an army hotel there where I stayed at, and I do not recall the name of it, but it was in Tokyo. On the way back to the United States, the ship put into Yokohama, and we spent an overnight in Yokohama. But other than that, the R&Rs, one was R&R, and one I took 7 days leave of my own leave, and the 2 weeks I did spend in Japan. Living was very good there in Japan at the time, because the conversion rate was 360 yen per dollar. Right now it's about 110, markedly different. But your dollar went a long ways, what few dollars you had, of course.
Would you do the Korean War again?
If my country needed me, and if I could pass the physical, I would be glad to. There's a question there, though. But back in the day, yeah, if I was a young man again at that time, sure I would.
Any questions? No. I think that's going to wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you much, boys.
What was your job, or what did you do there?
Okay, I actually had several jobs. When we first landed there, we landed at Incheon, and they put us on a train to go down to Daegu, South Korea. And when we looked at the train, we were walking along the tracks carrying our duffel bags, and there's this old rusted heap with no windows on it and everything. We were wondering, wow, look at this bombed out train. And it turned out that's the train we were actually taking. And Korea has a lot of mountains, so therefore with mountains you have a lot of tunnels. And in those days it was a steam engine. So every tunnel you went in and no windows, we were covered with soot by the time we got to Daegu. When I got to Daegu, I was assigned to an engineering company. This was in an old Japanese college is where it was located, and the facility was pretty nice. And what our responsibilities there were was to collect a lot of the war had just ended, so collecting a lot of the camouflage nets and a lot of the weapons and so on, boxing them all up and shipping them back out to the States. I was there about 6 or 7 weeks when orders came down that the unit itself was going back to the States, but those of us who had just gotten there obviously weren't going back home already, so we were assigned new assignments. So we took a long, not train ride this time, but a long truck ride to as far as you could go in South Korea. We finished up at the DMZ, the 38th parallel. And there I was assigned to the 24th Infantry Division, 34th Regiment, 3rd Battalion Headquarters Company. And it was our responsibility to keep our eye on the North Koreans. At that point, we were within 1 mile of their outpost. We could see each other back and forth from our bunkers. We would be taking pictures, they would be taking pictures, and they would constantly play loud music 24 hours a day to try and disrupt your sleeping habits and so on, just anything to annoy you. Our initial response, or our most important responsibility was, aside from keeping track of them, was if the North Koreans and Chinese decided to invade again, we were responsible to blow up a bridge that was over the Imjim River. Now, the Imjim River is where we were assigned, and that river went from the Yellow Sea in South Korea to the Sea of Japan through North Korea. So it was a rather long river, and this is how they came down on the first invasion, through that pass. So it was our responsibility, if they did come again, to blow up this bridge, which was totally loaded with dynamite at all times, and it was ready to go. And our company was assigned to actually blowing the bridge, and we would have maneuvers at least once a month on exercising what you would do if they did come over, what you would do at the bridge, and so on. And if they did come, the signal to blow the bridge, I still remember it today, even though it was over 60 years ago, is the Miami story is ready to be told. And if that came over the radio, we would then hit the plunger and the bridge would go. And it was our responsibility then to try and hold it, because we were on the wrong side of the bridge. We were on the north side of the bridge. It was our responsibility to hold that position until they could bring up reinforcements from the south, from Seoul and other cities in the south. That pretty much describes my job. I was actually what's called a rifleman. I never did fire my rifle. We did make many patrols into the DMZ. The North Koreans had a habit of setting fires out in the DMZ, trying to get you to go out, and they had lots of landmines and things, but fortunately over the time we didn't run into any problems.
What was your job, or what did you do?
My job was 0311, rifleman, infantry training. Then I got a squad of my own. I was attached to a headquarters company. I was with the 1st Marine Division, 7th Marine Regiment, attached to headquarters company.